I settled 8 other wars, India, Pakistan. I settled other wars that were Vladimir Putin called me, Armenia, Azerbaijan. He said, I can't believe you settled that one. They were going on for 35 years. I settled it in one day. And President Putin called me. He said, I can't believe I worked on that war for 10 years trying to settle it. I couldn't do it. I said, do me a favor, focus on settling your war. Don't worry about that one. What does the United States get out of all of this work, all of this money, other than death, destruction, and massive amounts of cash going to people who don't appreciate what we do? They don't appreciate what we do.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. Donald Trump has not settled 8 wars. He's actually starting them. Congressman Jason Crow, who we had on the show last week, just called out this hypocrisy beautifully.
As a 3-time combat veteran, I get pretty damn hot when a 5-time draft dodger like Donald Trump pounds his chest and bangs the war drums in Washington talking about sending boots in the ground. We're not even a year into this administration, and President Trump has bombed 7 countries. He doesn't seem to see a problem that he doesn't think he can bomb his way out of. I learned years ago that when elites like Donald Trump bang the war drums and pound their chests in Washington, D.C., and talk about sending troops into the ground or into combat, he's not talking about his kids. He's not talking about all of his minions' kids. He's talking about kids like me and the people that I grew up in working class areas, rural places around the country that have to pick up rifles, jump in the tanks or helicopters and do the thing and do the tough work. Well, America is over it. We're going to push for war powers reform. We're going to reassert our constitutional authority because it is not just our right, it is our duty to stand in the breach and take the votes and tell any president, Republican or Democrat, that you can't continue to send our men and women around the world into harm's way without a debate and vote in this body.
As for the conflicts Donald Trump says he's ended, those ridiculous claims have made him and the U.S. an international laughingstock. Here's a group of world leaders, including the president of France, laughing behind Donald Trump's back, mocking him because they failed to thank him for ending wars he didn't end.
You should make an apology to us, because you didn't congratulate us for the peace deal that President Trump made between Albania and Azerbaijan.
I'm sorry for that.
Yeah. So, and you worked very hard. You worked very hard.
One of the failures of our Congress in this moment is exercising its constitutional prerogative to declare wars, to serve as a check on the executive's war-making powers. Democrats like Jason Crow are trying to remedy that, but the Republican caucus in the House of Representatives seems to be giving Donald Trump yet another blank check to send America to war. Right now, we have U.S. Navy warships steaming towards Iran, ready to drop more bombs there to bring peace. I'm not saying that we don't live in a dangerous world and that sometimes we got to go after bad guys. I was a U.S. Navy pilot. I get it. But I no longer trust this president to place America's national security first. At every turn, he has weakened America's standing in the world and undermined our security. And now, a story broken by the New York Times reveals that the Trump regime is pushing to use the U.S. military inside Mexico to go after drug cartels. We're talking about boots on the ground in a part of the world with historic memories, bad ones, of U.S. interventionism. This would be a terrible idea for most administrations. For this one, it's a recipe for disaster. I asked Kris Goldsmith, U.S. Army vet, founder of Veterans Fighting Fascism, and host of the On Offense podcast, to come on the show to help unpack this for us. Here's our conversation. Kris, welcome to the show. Are we doing the war on drugs again? Is that what's going on? Because it feels like it.
We are living the fantasies that I had as a 19-year-old when I was in Iraq. I remember sitting in Iraq, and my parents used to send me the Newsday. I'm born and raised in Long Island, New York. And they'd send me the Newsday. It would take a few weeks to get to me. And I was reading about this surge in heroin deaths back in 2005. which was unlike my childhood, right? It felt like things at home were changing. There was, allegations of cartels and the drugs were obviously coming from overseas. And I remember sitting in a combat zone in the third year of what turned out to be a nearly 2-decade-long war in Iraq, thinking, why am I not in Mexico right now? Right? I was 19 years old. I had a high school education and that's it, right? That my solution to the problem of people dying domestically of drugs was let's go invade our next door neighbor. I can tell you now with, my life is twice as long as it was back then, that was a silly and childish, version of a good idea. But that is what the Trump administration is trying to do right now.
It appears what Trump himself is asking for. Like, this is his 19-year-old fantasy. The idea of having American boots on the ground seems to be coming from Trump. And no doubt Hegseth is like feeding it, right? This does not seem to be the DOD or the intelligence community saying, yeah, we need Americans fighting in Mexico.
Yeah, so this is a story that was an exclusive with the New York Times last week. And I thought when it came out, it would be the only thing that people were talking about. But Trump is also talking about invading Greenland, right? So there's only so much that the Sunday news shows can talk about. When the New York Times reached out to the Pentagon for comment, and they did, the Pentagon responded. And the Pentagon said to the questions like, are you planning to put troops on the ground and fire Hellfire missiles into Mexico? The answer from the Pentagon on the record was, we stand ready and waiting for the president's orders. So that is what Trump wants to do. He wants to bring a hot war to our borders in the United States. And while I can understand, because I was there, 20 years ago when I was a kid, thinking that this was a good idea, but now I understand that violence doesn't stay where you put it. And putting violence, instigating more violence, 10 miles, 60 miles, 100 miles south of our border of Texas, that violence is going to come creeping back, and it's going to come in a way that Americans are absolutely not prepared for, and none of us want.
It's Ken Harbaugh with a quick break to tell you about something new. Battle Buddies is my latest weekly show where I try to find common ground with a conservative who I consider a true friend, David Bellavia, the only surviving Medal of Honor recipient from the war in Iraq. A Navy vet, an Army vet from opposite ends of the political spectrum, engaging in a civil conversation like we used to have. From the ICE immigration crackdowns to Trump's takeover of Venezuela, David and I take on the toughest issues of the day with genuine respect for each other, in spite of our very different perspectives. They're not always easy conversations, but they're always important, and that's something we need more of. Respectful dialogue between people who disagree, but who have figured out how to stay friends. Check out Battle Buddies today. 2 vets, 2 views, 1 nation. Find us on the Valor Media Network. The link's below. Thanks. The whole approach ignores the most important side of the equation, which is the demand. During the operations, they may still be ongoing. We're so distracted now, but during the operations against the Venezuelan boats in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, which wasn't fentanyl, by the way, another lie by the Trump regime, it was cocaine and marijuana. But even as we're blowing boats out of the water in the Caribbean carrying cocaine, the price of cocaine on the street was going down. There is going to be an unlimited supply if you have that kind of demand. And blowing up warehouses in Mexico is doing nothing to stem the demand in the U.S., which is really the more important half of the equation.
Yeah. I mean, we have had drug companies that have been fueling an epidemic of addiction, right? I have had addiction in my family. I am, an alcoholic, right? The textbook definition. I drink more than I should. drink more than is healthy for me, right? I am an addict. So I understand this problem from a very personal level. Something I lost my father to, a life of addiction. So this is something that I take personally. And that's why when I thought I was, when I was 19, 20 years old, I was like, fuck it, let's go invade Mexico because we need to go get the bad guys. But again, with age, I have come to understand that addiction is a disease and you can't treat it with hellfire missiles. That is not, without stemming the demand for these drugs, for these deadly drugs, you're not going to stop the flow. By ratcheting up the violence, however, you're going to increase the likelihood that cartels are going to engage in retaliatory attacks. Cartels are, a government almost, right? They have an immense amount of resources. And I'm just stating facts. I'm not saying this is a good thing. If we start to put pressure on by putting American troops on the ground, we better hope that no American gets identified. Because if any Americans on the street get identified, what happens to their families back home is going to be absolutely disgusting. And it is going to be something that we do not, as a people, have the stomach for. And I don't want to see American military families getting butchered here in the United States because Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth have a 19-year-old's idea of what good foreign policy looks like.
That was part 1 of my conversation with Kris Goldsmith. In part 2, out tomorrow, we talk about how cartels have actually been dismantled in other countries by supporting local efforts. See you then.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.